Is exactly what I need to scoop Parker. Give me some of that web action.
See you, chump.
What the hell?
Testing. This is my second time recording this script because the first time I recorded it I had a fan on in the background, so let's hope I don't mess this up again. There are certain films that stop feeling like films. They become a sort of place in your mind. Instead of thinking about individual scenes, you remember how they made you feel at a place in time that no longer exists. And that's exactly what Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy has become for me. Growing up, this wasn't just my favourite superhero trilogy, it was the trilogy. To this day, I still do a yearly rewatch of all three films. That's right, all three films. I know the dialogue before the characters say it, and I know exactly when Danny Elfman's score is about to kick in. And with Spider-Man Brand New Day on the horizon, me and my girlfriend decided to watch through this trilogy to get our little fix of the webhead before the film comes out. So, we sat down, grabbed our popcorn, and journeyed through a fever dream of nostalgia. Within the first 5 minutes of Spider-Man 1, I had this cheesy grin on my face that wasn't going away. There's something almost impossible to describe about Raimi's direction if you've grown up on the modern superhero schlock of today. Every single frame feels handcrafted. Obviously, I don't mean this literally. What I mean is, every single decision feels like it belongs to a singular person rather than a company. The opening titles haven't even finished before you're already in this heightened version of New York, where everything is just slightly bigger than life. The colours are almost always golden hour in Sam Raimi's version of New York, and every single extra in the back of these scenes is hamming it up to the max.
Peter, this was amazing.
Genuinely, if you want 2 hours of non-stop entertainment, I suggest just sticking on this first film and only actually watching the background extras. Anyway, we start our trip down memory lane with a voiceover from childhood hero Tobey Maguire, and I will be playing a snippet of every single one of Tobey Maguire's opening monologues because this man does not improve with age.
Who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. If somebody said it was a happy little tale, if somebody told you I was just your average ordinary guy not a care in the world, somebody lied.
We are then shown him being bullied by every member of his high school, and that also includes his bus driver. Somehow I'd forgotten how refreshing this is, as morbid as that sounds. One thing superhero films have slowly lost over the last 20 years is that they've become more spectacle. Budgets have gotten bigger and CGI has improved. Kind of. So it's nice to see a young teenager running after his high school bus. Somewhere along the way, a lot of these films have started feeling like they belong to the same universe, even when they don't. You can usually tell what studio made them rather than who directed the films. This trilogy doesn't have that problem. You feel Sam Raimi's artistic vision in almost every scene. Sometimes it's obvious, like the blatant Evil Dead reference in the second film that we'll talk about later. And sometimes it's as obvious as a close-up that's cartoonishly dramatic. And it's not just Raimi's Spider-Man that has this distinct personality. Just look at Tim Burton's Batman films. They don't look like any other superhero film to come before or after. love them or hate them, Christopher Nolan's Batman films have their own identity too, even if this does get far less obvious as his trilogy continues. We're then introduced to possibly the greatest performance in the entire trilogy, Norman Osborn, played by the one and only Willem Dafoe. You'd be mistaken into thinking that the Green Goblin memes over the last few years have exaggerated Willem Dafoe's performance, but if anything, they've undersold it. He does so much wacky shit in this film, you wouldn't actually believe it, so I'm just going to throw a little Green Goblin montage in here.
Because it's right.
Here's the real truth.
No one says no to me!
Every scene, he's making a completely fearless acting choice, and I think that's because Raimi never actually treats the film's tonal shifts like a problem that needs solving. He actually leans into these quirks. When the comedy is there, it's genuinely funny and the action feels like it's ripped straight from a comic panel. The film isn't trying to convince you that superheroes could exist. It's inviting you into a world where they already do. I'd written a note in my script that just says I can practically smell the place, and as cringe and typical as this sounds, I don't really know how else to describe it. This version of New York just feels lived in. When Peter inevitably gets bitten by the radioactive spider, we get one of the funniest scenes in the trilogy, in which we see Peter's skull while he's dreaming. Sam Raimi must have an interest in these CGI skulls, because the Goblin turns Norman's business partners into skeletons later on too. The entire film is incredibly cheesy, and watching it back now, the optimism in this first film has caught me completely off guard. I don't think I'd realised how much I'd missed this film. When Uncle Ben says his iconic line,
With great power comes great responsibility.
it feels like a warm blanket over me. And by this point, I was probably 45-ish minutes into the film, which means it's time to watch Uncle Ben get capped. Everyone remembers Uncle Ben's death. It's the defining moment in the Spider-Man mythos. Peter lets a thief escape out of spite, and Uncle Ben is murdered because of it.
Thanks.
Funnily enough, when I was writing the script, that's not the scene that actually stayed with me. It's what happens immediately afterwards. This might just be because of how much I've watched these films, but I digress. Peter chases Uncle Ben's killer through the city, fueled entirely by anger. This isn't Spider-Man. For a few minutes, revenge completely takes over Peter, and they end up inside this abandoned warehouse where Peter confronts Uncle Ben's killer. But in doing so, Ben's killer falls to his death. When the camera finally cuts to Peter, he looks horrified. Like the adrenaline has left his body all at once, and he's forced to confront what he's been chasing. I'd always thought Uncle Ben's death was the moment that Peter Parker became Spider-Man, but watching it now, I'm not so sure. Uncle Ben teaches Peter about responsibility, but I think this moment teaches him something else. It teaches Peter that revenge won't leave him with anything tangible. Peter never gets closure for Uncle Ben's death. Until we get to the retcon in the third film. Watching this trilogy as an adult really does make you appreciate Sam Raimi in ways that 12-year-old me never could. And I thought that was going to be my biggest takeaway. I thought I'd finish this section of the video with something along the lines of, they really don't make superhero films like this anymore, and partially that is true. Because without a doubt my favourite moment in the entire film comes when Green Goblin has Mary Jane and a cable car full of children, and he's dangling them both off of a bridge, and he gives the stupidest villain monologue of all time as an ultimatum.
Spider-Man! This is why only fools are heroes. Because you never know when some lunatic will come along with the sadistic choice. Let die the woman you love, or suffer the little children. Make your choice, Spider-Man.
I think Cosmonaut Variety Hour said it best when he said,
I mean, the climax has the villain literally holding the love interest in one hand and a metal box of children in the other, and Spider-Man has to pick which one he's gonna save. If something this stereotypical happened in a superhero movie today, there would be public outcry about how silly it is.
by the time the final battle arrives, Spider-Man has every reason to despise the Green Goblin. If there was ever a time for Peter to stop pulling his punches, it's now. Which is why when Peter finally finds out the Green Goblin is actually Norman Osborn, it still hits so hard to this day for me. I've always had a special place in my heart for this fight. It's gritty in a way that no other superhero fight is for me. Peter's suit gets royally fucked up here, and I remember as a kid owning a Spider-Man action figure, and I really wanted it to look like the battle damage suit. Once Norman's beaten, he begins calling Peter by his name, appealing to the relationship that they'd built before everything fell apart. And Peter listens. After everything that's happened, Peter's instinct isn't anger, it's empathy. But in true Goblin fashion, Norman reaches for one last trick. The camera lets us see exactly what's about to happen, and Peter's spidey sense senses it as well. Anyway. For a comic book film from the early 2000s, this shit is super dark. In fact, it's the reason I think the violence was so toned down in subsequent sequels. It's actually uncomfortable to watch because Peter treats Norman with more kindness in his final moments than Norman ever showed him during the entire film. Even after Peter discovers the monster Norman's become, he still couldn't completely separate those two people. And I think that's why the ending is so palpable. The film outright refuses to give Peter Parker the satisfaction of defeating a villain. Instead, it asks him to grieve one, in the same way he's grieved Uncle Ben. Peter brings Norman's body back to his house and places him on his couch. I have no idea how the blanket covering Norman isn't drenched in his blood, but fuck it, we'll ignore it. Harry walks in and finds his father dead and Spider-Man standing over the body. And then this sets off Harry Osborn's arc for later movies. What's interesting is Peter doesn't defend himself or try to explain. Watching it again, I realised that the tragedy of the scene isn't just that Harry blames Spider-Man, it's that Peter allows him to. Because what else can he do? Tell Harry that his father's been spending the last few weeks dressed as a goblin blowing up hospitals? By the end, Peter has saved New York and he's lost his uncle and Norman Osborn, and he's also walked away from the woman he loves. And now his best friend believes that Spider-Man has murdered his father. And that's part of the reason that I think this film was such a game changer when it released. most superhero films of the time finished with victory, but this film chooses to do something far more nuanced. The first Spider-Man film in Sam Raimi's trilogy will always be a perfect film in my eyes. It's truly stood the test of time in a way that every other superhero film doesn't. Which means if we're going off of Letterboxd ratings, then I'm gonna give this film a whopping 5 stars out of 5. And now let's move on to the magnum opus of superhero films,
Pizza time.
Spider-Man 2. One of my favourite scenes in Spider-Man 2 is actually the opening scene of Spider-Man 2. It's quite simple, it's just Peter delivering pizzas. On paper, it literally sounds like the most boring way you could possibly open a superhero film, but it speaks in volumes as to why this film still works. On the surface, it's a funny gag for children, but it's kind of depressing. Peter gets shit on this entire film and doesn't receive an ounce of gratitude from anyone. Peter's life is, to put it simply, absolute pizza-filled torture, and his only reward for this is getting fired from his job in the opening 10 minutes.
You're fired.
Every time it looks like Peter is getting somewhere in this film, life asks him to be Spider-Man instead. Even when he does finally make it somewhere, he's usually too late.
You're late. I'm not paying for those.
And watching it now as an adult, it's such a visceral feeling. Honestly, if you haven't watched this film since you were a child, I highly recommend revisiting it, because I genuinely think it's the most human character study of a superhero ever put to film. Peter isn't failing because he's irresponsible throughout this film. He's failing because he's trying to be responsible for an entire city at once. I think when I was younger, I watched Spider-Man 2 as a film about sacrifice, but watching it now, I'm not actually sure that's what the film's about. I think it's about someone desperately trying not to sacrifice anything. Peter's trying to hold every part of his life together at the same time, and the film keeps proving that this is impossible. There's this brilliant little moment where Peter's neighbour bangs on his door asking for rent, and it's played for laughs, but again, you just feel sorry for Peter. That's what makes this version of Peter Parker feel so different from not only MCU's Spidey, but every superhero we've had since the boom of Marvel. With Raimi's Spider-Man film, we often follow a simple structure. We have a scene with Peter, and then we have a scene with the bad guy. But modern superhero films do something quite different. They usually separate the superhero into 2 separate identities. You've got the superhero scenes, and then you've got the civilian scenes. Spider-Man 2 never lets Peter make that distinction. The 2 lives are constantly crashing into each other. Spider-Man will ruin Peter's job, and Peter's job will stop Spider-Man from being, well, Spider-Man. Mary Jane also suffers emotionally because of Spider-Man, and Peter loses his best friend caused by the actions of Spider-Man in the first film. Every decision creates another problem somewhere down the road. Nothing exists in isolation. Which means when Peter's powers start disappearing, it's simply because Peter's body has given up, which is far more poignant. He's constantly running from one responsibility to the next without ever stopping to ask himself whether he can actually carry all of them, until his body simply answers for him. When Peter falls between 2 buildings, it's still one of my favourite moments in the entire trilogy. So much so that I'm using it for the thumbnail of the video. For the first time in the trilogy, being Spider-Man doesn't feel empowering. It feels like another expectation that he can't live up to. And that's why I love the sequence where Peter gives up being Spider-Man. For the first time since Uncle Ben's death, Peter actually gets to be Peter. As a viewer, obviously you know inevitably he's going to don the mask again, but it's really nice to watch a world in which Peter gets to live a normal existence, even if it is fleeting. But the world around Peter doesn't stop needing Spider-Man just because he's decided that he's had enough. And that's where I think Spider-Man 2 becomes something much more interesting than just another superhero film. Peter isn't choosing between being Spider-Man and Peter Parker. He's choosing between his own happiness or everyone else's. And as shitty of a choice as that is for a 20-year-old, God, does it make a good story. I completely forgot how much I liked Otto Octavius. For a good chunk of the film, he is just Otto. And Alfred Molina nails this shit. The first time we meet him, he's showing Peter around his lab like a giddy puppy. He's getting carried away, talking about his sun fusion majiggy thing. Which is actually my only nitpick of the entire film. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I've never really been able to completely understand this guy's motives. But that's a little bit of a running theme in all of these films. So maybe it's just how Sam Raimi sees classic superhero villain motives. They're just evil dudes doing evil dude stuff, I guess. Anyway, you can tell Otto absolutely loves what he does, and there's a really genuine vibe about him. When he meets Peter, it just feels like he's meeting someone he'd actually enjoy spending an afternoon with. There's one moment in particular that really stuck with me, in which Otto tells Peter,
Intelligence is not a privilege, it's a gift. And you use it for the good of mankind.
For some reason, I'd completely forgotten this line, but hearing it now, I think I understood why Peter looks up to Otto so much. That line is exactly the sort of person that Peter is trying to become, and for a little while, Otto genuinely looks like he's figured life out. Peter has finally found another mentor, for about all of 5 minutes. One thing I love about the experiment scene is that it isn't just big and loud for the sake of it. It does feel inevitable. The closer Otto gets to success, the more nervous you become as an audience member. Once his wife dies and the tentacle chip is destroyed, the film turns into Evil Dead for about 10 minutes, and it's utterly glorious. I love that Raimi got a hold of this summer blockbuster and thought, I'm going to sneak some of my horror film into this, just to traumatize some kids. It's just amazing. The doctors in this room aren't fighting a comic book villain, they're trying to survive one. It's one of the coolest scenes in the whole trilogy, possibly even the coolest. And still, even after this sequence, you never forget who Otto used to be, which makes everything afterwards feel uncomfortable. When Harry gives Otto the tritium? Is that how you say it? Tritium? When Harry gives Otto the shiny thing, it feels weird. Otto barely engages with him. Harry isn't really seen as a person, and in Doc Ock's eyes, just more of another step towards finishing the experiment. It's a lot sadder than I remembered. The arc itself is almost a complete rehash of the previous film, just done far better in my opinion. Which is exactly why I love the ending. Spider-Man doesn't punch Otto into submission like he does with Norman Osborn. Peter still believes that Otto can be saved, and he can. I don't think what Otto gets at the end of this film is redemption. I think he receives clarity. He gets the chance to make his own decision again, and in doing so, he chooses to save the city. Now, I'm going to hit you all with a hot take here. I don't actually think the train sequence is the best part of Spider-Man 2. Like I've just said, I think the climax of the film still manages to resonate with me more, but it's still perfect, which is why I've given it its own little section here. Obviously, the action's incredible. Even now, the scale still feels massive, which is definitely impressive after years of watching CGI monsters fighting other CGI monsters. But I think the most impressive part about the action is that Raimi somehow keeps the whole thing readable from start to finish. When Peter realises that the train isn't stopping, there's this tiny glimpse where Peter looks ahead and sees the tracks have run out, and he almost immediately accepts what's about to happen. He just starts panicking and firing webs at anything he can find. If there's a cat on a New York high-rise somewhere, it probably got yanked along with half a building. It's a desperate plea, and you can actually feel Peter running out of options. His suit is literally tearing apart, and every muscle in his body looks like it's about to give up. Insert Toby constipation face. I also love the little detail that nobody is told to help Spider-Man. They all simply do it off of pure instinct. For the first time in this trilogy, the civilians of New York get to see Spider-Man the way we do. An exhausted kid who's put his life on the line for them without thanks every single day. This is the moment the entire film has been building towards. For 2 hours we've watched Peter eat shit, and finally, someone carries the load for him. It's such a simple idea, but I think I've never seen another superhero film achieve this level of emotion in the same way that Raimi does. It's not a long scene either. In universe, it's probably just long enough for Peter to catch his breath before getting back up, but there's still something really beautiful. Peter spends the entire film asking himself if being Spider-Man is worth it, without ever realising that the people on this train have answered that question for him. By the time that Spider-Man 2 reaches its final act, unless you're aged 8 or below, I can't really imagine that you're watching the film for the action anymore. You almost forget there's still a supervillain to deal with. Obviously I'm over-exaggerating, but I think that's what makes the ending work. Thematically, it doesn't suddenly become a different film. The mentor that Peter has fought against is dead, and just like the last film, you never really get a chance to sit with it, because Peter doesn't really get time to grieve. And now we're going to talk about Mary Jane. I've not actually spoke about MJ in my review so far, and I'll be honest, I think I understood her a lot more on this rewatch of the trilogy. Online, she's become sort of a Skylar type character, someone that people seem to blindly hate on, but from her point of view, Peter keeps disappearing and making promises that he can't keep. Shit, I'd be pissed off at Peter as well. He pushes her away and gets upset when she starts to move on. She spends most of the film trying to understand somebody who refuses to let her in, which makes the ending feel earned. And it's not because Peter finally gets the girl, it's because Mary Jane finally gets the truth. There's something I really love about their final conversation, because the danger of being in love with Spider-Man still exists. Everything that made their relationship impossible at the start of the film is still there. The only thing that's changed is Mary Jane has a choice now. For the first time, Peter stops deciding for her and she makes the decision all by herself. It's probably one of the most satisfying endings in any superhero film, And while I do still think that this is the best Spider-Man film, boy is it not the most fun. That belongs to a different Spidey film that we will officially be covering now.
One weird thing, there haven't been any big supervillains around since Doc Ock. But I have this bad feeling like the sky's gonna fall or something.
We start our film off with a Peter who has actually managed to sort his life out in between the last film and now.
It's my girlfriend.
The only thing he's not managed to fix is his relationship with Harry. Did I mention at all in the last film that him and Harry weren't really friends? Well, Harry hates Spider-Man and also hates Peter because of it.
Tell it to my father. Raise him from the dead.
Anyway, we're then rushed into the film introducing two of our key villains for this film. See, unlike the previous two, we don't have one central antagonist in this film. We actually have three. So instead of using the tried and true formula of Peter Parker scene and then villain scene, we now have Peter, then Harry, then the Sandman, and then Venom. Even later in the film, Peter himself, but we'll get to that. I swear to God, the pacing of this film is like a crack addict. This shit doesn't slow down for a second, and after watching Harry inject himself with some of the MCU's super serum, we get our first little glance into the Sandman's origin story, and it's very compelling. He's just a man who's had some bad luck looking out for his daughter. I've just forgotten I've actually completely skipped over Venom's origin story, so let's do that now. There's not really much here, to be honest. Peter and MJ are out after one of MJ's shows, and I shit you not, a meteorite just conveniently lands right next to them. And that's it, that's all we get for Venom. After this, we're treated to our first of 5 major fights in this film. I actually really like this fight. Peter is less trying to fight Harry and more protect the ring that Aunt May gave him. We're then treated to, without a doubt, the dumbest plot convenience in the entire trilogy: Harry Osborn's amnesia. You can tell that Sam Raimi really had zero idea how to balance 3 major villain storylines, so he just kind of chose to completely write one of them out of the story for the time being. But in all honesty, Harry was the worst antagonist to pick to do this. We've been building him up for 3 films now, and to be quite frank, he's probably my personal favourite character in the trilogy. He just has a really compelling story arc. So my opinion definitely isn't biased here. With Harry now out of commission, we swiftly move on to making the Sandman, well, Sandy. And Jesus, this sequence has still aged to perfection. I don't know what it is with older MCU movies and having their characters emotionally try and pick up an object that they can't pick up anymore, but this shit just hits every single time. After seeing the Sandy Sandman, the film is forced to rush introducing Gwen Stacy and Eddie Brock, so we get another great action set piece in which Spidey saves Gwen and Eddie Brock stands there. Jesus, they really didn't know how to bring him into the story. But immediately after this is when we get our real introduction to Eddie Brock, and he's very good. I really love Eddie Brock in this film. He's really squirmy, and Topher Grace plays the character perfectly. It's just a shame that he's written like total shit. I've also just realised I've managed to cover both Spider-Man 1 and 2 without talking about J. Jonah Jameson. I don't know how I've managed that, but anyway, as Eddie calls him,
JJ
is awesome in these films. In fact, he's so perfect for the role that not only has the MCU brought him back to reprise the role, but Insomniac's J. Jonah Jameson is just a blatant impersonation.
cocky little guy, aren't you?
We then get this ridiculous scene where Harry and Peter are playing basketball in Harry's house. Guys, we understand that these two are best friends. We don't need this super cheesy sequence. Anyway, Harry unconsciously shows Peter that he's still got his Green Goblin powers, and Peter looks quite mortified at the fact. In the next scene, we get some really nice symbolism, actually, where we see both Eddie and Peter taking pictures of their love interests. It's really good. It's nice seeing that these two characters really are just the flip side of each other's coin. What I don't like is that, for some reason, Peter seems to have an ego from the very beginning of this film.
They love me.
I'd be lying if I said that I was a major fan of the comics, but I always thought it was the symbiote that amplified Peter's egotistical tendencies. But in this film, he just seems to be acting like a bit of an arsehole right from the start. So much so that he kisses Gwen Stacy in front of MJ and is then surprised that she's pissed off. Surely Peter Parker can't be this dense. Anyway, the last 10 minutes haven't had any punching involved, so it's time to get the symbiote on Peter and get this show on the road. We eventually find out that Sandman was actually the cause of Uncle Ben's death. Okay, I do think retcons can be beneficial to the story and add extra depth, and I honestly don't really have a major issue with the one in this film specifically. And it does sort of work. The central theme of Spider-Man 3 is forgiveness, so it does give the film an extra layer of depth for Peter. Anyway, Spider-Man murders the shit out of Sandman. Peter tracks Sandman down to the sewers, where he kicks the life out of him and then drowns him. What I find even funnier than this is that immediately afterwards, he goes to Aunt May's house and says, "Yeah, that Sandman dude that killed your husband, yeah, Spider-Man murdered him." If she didn't know already that this dude was Spider-Man, she knows now. And now that Sandman's dead, it's time to revive Harry. So Harry is looking into a picture of his dad, and Norman just appears in front of him to remind him that he is in fact evil. I'm sorry, but you can't tell me this isn't the funniest film of all time. Funnily enough, we're then gifted both Tobey Maguire's best acted scene in the film and his worst, back to back.
Over. No. Please. Please don't say that.
I'm the other guy. I don't believe this. I don't believe you.
I love the little wink that Harry does. It's so devious, you just kind of have to respect it. And Peter, taking the news to heart that MJ likes Harry more than him, he decides to head to Harry's house and put another body on his ever-growing kill count. I always love how Tobey's Spider-Man just sort of resorts to punching his villains. Sure, Andrew can web a lizard up, but can he murder his best friend? Anyway, after blowing up Harry, we've arrived at what most of you have probably come here to see, Bully Maguire. And I hate to say it to you all, but I'm not really sure I have anything extra to add to this that hasn't been said a million times, so I'm just going to copy what I did with the Green Goblin and add a little Bully Maguire montage here.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye. You want forgiveness? Get religion. Find us some shade.
It's quite funny, Peter is actually that big of an arsehole during the sequence that he is the entire reason for Eddie Brock's origin story. Get ready for this. Peter is that big of a dick that Eddie Brock walks into a church and asks God if he can murder Peter Parker. During this, Peter is actually above Eddie at the top of the church, removing the symbiote, thus creating the birth of Sam Raimi's Venom. having the symbiote removed, Peter's now feeling a little sorry for himself, so Aunt May comes over and tells him to suck it up and deal with it. Anyway, third act time. Sandman is walking through one of the million alleyways that New York is home to, and Venom just seemingly comes flying out of nowhere and tries to attack him. I love that Sandman sees this big gooey alien thing and just fucking throws it. This guy could literally go and attack your family at any moment, but who cares? Funnily enough, I actually think that the Spider-Man 3 game does this scene better than the film does. Venom walks up to Sandman in Central Park and shows Flint that he has his daughter trapped, and if he doesn't help him track down and kill Spider-Man, then he's going to kill his daughter.
I've got the answer.
Yeah, wise guy. What side?
You're gonna help me kill him.
Hey, nobody said anything about killing. I just want him out of the way for a bit, that's all. So you can count me out, freak.
I wasn't offering you a choice.
Let's watch your temper here. There's children present.
Penny!
Daddy, I'm scared. Help me.
Isn't this sweet? Just like in the movies.
What do you want from me, you freak?
Freak? I'm the freak. Have you looked in a mirror lately? Now, let's talk about how we're going to destroy the spider.
Venom in the film kind of just says, "Come on, Flint, do it." And Flint does it. So Venom steals a taxi and just so happens to know MJ is going to get in it so he can kidnap her. Now that Peter knows this, it's time to fuck shit up. Literal chills. Peter goes to visit Harry and asks for some help, but now that Harry looks like Two-Face, I don't think he's in the fighting mood. But is somehow convinced by this dude. Thanks, Alfred. I am genuinely curious what Sam Raimi's original vision for this film would have been if the studio didn't force him to include Venom, because both Harry and Flint have genuinely really good redemption arcs in this film. Would Raimi have just committed to one of them staying evil?
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
God, I love this film. So, Eddie wants to get revenge on Peter because he got him fired and cooked him in front of Gwen. Sure, Peter is now getting his face absolutely rearranged by the Sandman, so much so that you'd probably think he was the one that forced Venom into this. I also don't know what it is about this film and the TASM films, but why do the citizens of New York like being stood 5 feet away from potential city-destroying events?
Never wound what you can't kill.
Ooh, you're odd, showing off.
Peter tries to tell Eddie to stop being an edgy emo dude, and Eddie says this.
I like being bad.
It makes me happy.
This is genuinely the greatest piece of art ever created. Just as Peter realizes Venom's weakness is high frequencies, Venom tries to give Peter the Norman Osborn special, and instead of trying to tackle Venom, Harry jumps in front of the blade. That could not have been the only option there. Anyway, Peter separates Eddie and Venom, but then blows them both up, and Sandman finally gives Peter closure with Uncle Ben, and Peter forgives him.
I forgive you.
And then finally, Harry and Peter forgive each other for the pain they've caused. Jesus, this video has taken me so long to get through, and I'm finally at the last scene. We end this masterpiece of a trilogy with Peter and MJ attending Harry's funeral and them ending up together. Whew! This video has literally been 3 weeks in the making. Words cannot describe how thankful I am for this to be over. I told myself when I started this channel that I'd never do this, but just like Spider-Man, the rules are changing. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, and if you loved it, maybe even consider subscribing. And if you didn't like it, well, let me know in the comments how much of a disgrace I am. Anyway, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. Goodbye.